Members, thank you very much for availing yourselves once again this morning. Can I just check from yourself, Shanaz, if we
Recording in progress.
If we have any apologies from the executive?
Chairperson, we have, I have not received apologies from the Minister or the Deputy Minister, but I did receive an apology from the DG, who is out of the country accompanying the Minister on an official trip. And the delegation will be led by Ms. Zwane this morning for the DSI.
All right, okay, no, thank you very much for that. Let me once again welcome all colleagues this morning, particularly colleagues from the Human Sciences Research Council, the HSRC. The main reason why we felt it was important was due to the regression in the audit outcomes of the entity. And, you know, it goes without saying that we really hold the Department of Science and Innovation together with its entities in high regard, and therefore we always expect, like we expect from all departments and their entities, but I think from the DSI and its entities, you know, our expectations are high, and therefore we would like to see the necessary action taken to ensure that we are able to remedy whatever the challenges would have been in the financial year 2020-2021. So without saying much more, really, I'd like to hand over to colleagues from the DSI. Perhaps that Mr. Zwane, who apparently is then representing the DGs. Oh, sorry, Ms. Zwane. Apologies for that, Mam Zwane. Ms. Kukuzwane, if there's anything you would like to say, perhaps from the department side, before we hand over to the entity, you're more than welcome to do so.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members, and good morning to all other colleagues. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. There's nothing much we would like to say as the DSI, except to apologize for the DG and the acting DG as well, Dr. Moafe. But I'm accompanied as part of the DSI delegation by Mr. Patel, the DDG for Program 5, as well as the governance team and the Office of the DG. Thank you, Chair. That would be all from our side.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Zwane. I would then assume that colleagues from the HSRC are ready, because I think when I hopped onto the meeting, they were indicating that they would like to start with flighting their presentations. I'd like to hand over to the chair of the board, Dr. Lubisi, and together with the acting CEO, Prof. Simbai. Colleagues, we have 45 minutes for your presentation. That would be followed by engagements from members where you will then respond to their comments and their remarks. I'd like to hand over to yourselves, Dr. Lubis.
Thank you very much, Chair, Honorable Chairperson, for giving us this opportunity. We want to say good morning to you and the honorable members of the committee here present. Morning to all colleagues from the DSI as well as the HSRC. I wish to indicate, Chairperson, that the new board of the HSRC took office only on the 1st of November 2021. So today is our 19th day in office, and none of the previous members of our board are in the new board. So I'm sure the chair would appreciate that the new members would know pretty much very little about what transpired in the early belly of the HSRC in the year under review. We appreciate having among us the recently retired chair of our board, Professor Mvuyo Tom, who has gracefully agreed to attend this meeting as part of our delegation. Also in attendance are some of my fellow board members, Professor Zethu Nkosi, Ms. Shamim Manju, and Dr. Khomutso Kasonkola, who are also with us. We are joined by the HSRC management as well, currently under the leadership of our acting CEO, Professor Leikner Simbai. We also have Professor Heidi van Rooyen, who is standing in as Deputy CEO for Research, as well as our CFO, Ms. Jacomine Rousseau, as well as Professor Nania Bolamula, who is acting Group Executive for Shared Services. With your permission, Chairperson, I would like to hand over to Professor Tom, the Incumbent Chairperson for the year under review, who has kindly availed himself, as I said earlier on, to facilitate the board transition and respond to the committee's questions where the new board might not be able to do so. We will rely on management after that, led by Professor Simbai, to take the committee through the presentation of the annual report. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lubisi. And I will just echo the greetings that we have already expressed to all the members, the honorable members here, and the honorable chair of the Portfolio Committee, without listing them so that we save the time for the 45 minutes. Chairperson and members of the Portfolio Committee, it is a real pleasure for me to present this report. And I'm not going to go into the details of the report. It's just the introductory parts that I will deal with, because the management will go through the report. This happens to be the last annual report from the previous board, and the first year of the strategic plan implementation, the 5-year plan, which ends in 2024-25, was started in 2020, following a review of the HSRC, which was done in 2018. That review highlighted various issues that are clearly tabulated in this report. And as we know, the HSRC is a statutory body. Its functions and its mandate are legalized in terms of the Health Sciences, Human Sciences Research Council, the Act number 17 of 2008. So that is what guides us in terms of our operations. The report that we will have just shows in the main the performance of the organization in the first year of the strategic plan. And I am happy to report that it has got a very impressive performance in terms of the APP that had been accepted by this parliament. And therefore, that part we will not dwell on with in my introductory remarks. The main issue for us as the old board is really to make sure that the new board has got a smooth transition as they start off in this financial year. And of course, they've started the financial year, which we had started on the 1st of April. So they've just started on the 1st of November. So part of the financial year is still our responsibility. The HSRC is a research council and is part of the family of the DSI. And we are happy to say that for the first 3 years of the board that has just left, we had clean audits. It's said that in our final year, we have to report a regression, as the chairperson has already alluded to. However, that will be fully explained in the presentation or in the question time as to how it arose. I do want to say upfront that it's a continuous process. It's not a new process. And the letters that we have had with the National Treasury and the interactions with National Treasury will be fully explained by the management. And this is based on collaborations. I must emphasize that point. The HSRC has to collaborate with various structures, mainly in the public sector, universities, the Medical Research Council, the NICD, and those collaborations at times need to be fast-tracked in terms of the delivery of processes. The HSRC in the year that we are reporting on was functioning under the cloud of the pandemic. Pandemic started in March 2020. So as we started the financial year in April, we started with the pandemic, and the new normal needed to be adhered to. And that was the challenge that faced the organization. Previous audits had not looked at this anomaly as a deviation. And I'm going into this, and I thought I would leave it to management, but I think I must mention it. Previous audits, which were clearly informed by reports that the management had not looked at the aspect of these collaborations and the procurement processes or the supply chain management issues in the manner in which the new audit has looked at. And therefore, there will be explanations for that as well. And therefore, Chairperson, as I stay on the path of handing over to the new board, the management will be asked to make the presentation, and I will be part of the discussion when questions come, so that I can explain some of the issues related to the board. And I now hand over to the acting CEO to deal with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tom and Dr. Lubisi. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, we are delighted to present our annual report to this August Portfolio Committee. Let's move on to the next slide. As usual, the management will share the presentation. I will kick off, and then also talk about our COVID response. And then Professor Van Rooyen will go through the performance overview, as well as our achievements during the past year. Then Professor Bola Mula will go through important areas of work in terms of our research, as well as update the committee on HR issues. And of course, the important part of the presentation will be done by our CFO, Ms. Rousseau, who will give the financial overview. And then I'll come at the end and summarize for us. Thank you. Next slide. Honorable members, as Professor Tom has just indicated, the HSRC works on the basis of the mandate given by the HSRC Act of 2008. This is what specified what the objects of the organization are, and there are 8 of them. So we undertake research in human sciences, which is relevant to South Africa, Africa, and the world. And these projects are linked to public sector collaborative programs. Secondly, we inform policy, monitor policy, and evaluate implemented policy. Next, we encourage debate through effective circulation and distribution of research. Next, we build research capacity and infrastructure in South Africa and Africa. Next, we support and build research collaboration with the people and government. Next, we are responsible for researching and analyzing development problems in the country. Next, penultimately, we develop and make publicly available new data sets to support research, development, and public discussion. And lastly, as a research council, we're expected to develop and improve the methodologies that are used. Next slide. Like all organizations in the country, we have been impacted by COVID-19, and we have had to adjust the way we do business. So essentially, many research projects that we undertake had to be adjusted as the various levels of lockdown came into effect, with the research protocols being revised and resubmitted for ethics review to account for new risks and different forms of engagement with research participants. Through adaptation and implementation of new research methods, which use primarily online surveys, or through this medium that we are on, the HSRC was able to ensure that ongoing research studies proceeded and structures were set in place to respond to new opportunities necessitated by the need for evidence-based responses to the impacts of COVID-19. Our IT department strategic plan was tested during the pandemic. In its third year of existence, the IT strategic plan enabled working from home via the mobility strategy, with servers having been moved to the cloud. Thus, during the pandemic, the architecture was already in place, allowing a seamless work from home ability. IT security was enhanced and tweaked synchronously with unfolding risks. User awareness education increased to ensure minimum exposure to cybercrime, and policies were created or modified to improve the IT user experience when working from home, and additional cloud security technologies are currently being deployed. Next slide. In line with the national COVID-19 regulations, the HSRC was faced with severe restrictions, but complied with lockdown regulations to prevent loss of life and maintain the well-being of staff, while at the same time maintaining business continuity in critical organizational areas. The HSRC developed a COVID-19 response plan that covered risk exposure, impact on operations, safety measures, action plans, and potential impact on revenue. This document was also informed by directives from the Presidency and from the Department of Science and Innovation. As the slide shows, the HSRC's approach to mitigating the impact of COVID-19 pandemic included the following: establishing a COVID-19 HSRC task team, developing a COVID-19 risk register, keeping employees safe and restricting possible workplace exposures and infection rates, and permitting employees to keep working from home as far as possible. We also had continuous circulation of educational material on COVID-19. We did comply with national lockdown regulations, And as I said earlier, we adopted research and fieldwork protocols in line with national lockdown restrictions. And finally, we had engaging management and ongoing electronic communication. I'd like to pass on the presentation to Professor van Rooyen.
I did the thing that everybody does. You start speaking and you're on mute and then you realize it. So my apologies. Good morning, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. It's always wonderful to be presenting to you. Also, good morning to our DSI colleagues, our outgoing ex-chair, Professor Tom, and our incoming new chair, Dr. Lubisi. Good morning, everyone. So in this year that our CEO, acting CEO, has just described of a really difficult year of having to tweak and quite significantly adjust our procedures, our protocols, our work. How did the HSRC do with respect to its performance? This slide really just gives you an indicator of our new indicators that we've set alongside the new strategic plan that Professor Tom mentioned earlier on. These indicators really talk about the HSRC's desire to do work with greater impact, or to have a greater focus on ensuring that our work has impact. And these indicators speak to that. So talk about an important role for the HSRC is always in the space of knowledge production and our leading in that space. To talk about and to really look at what are the indicators of us having the kind of policy influence we want. A recognition about partnerships and how central they are in our work in the HSRC, whether that partnership is with government or civil society or with community. We recognize that our work doesn't end at the point of producing a good publication, that really in many ways it's the beginning of that. And so really important in looking at how do we use these partnerships and how do we disseminate, distill our evidence and make sure that it's in the hands of people that can use it. Transformed research capabilities is the next target indicator, and really looking at about a transformed HSRC with respect to with respect to race, with respect to gender. How are we doing regarding that? And this has been an ongoing question, issue, rightly so, and concern for the committee, and we will speak to that in the presentation today. And then ultimately the big question in this context of dwindling funds, both internally and around the world, just generally, but certainly last year as we were all impacted by COVID, how did the HSRC do with regard to sustainability? So that's the acronym in the middle, LEAPS, and I'll talk to how we did with respect to each of those now. Next slide, please. So I think we're really pleased. I don't think we've ever had a year like this in the HSRC. And it's like a deep irony to us in actually what has been one of the most difficult years in the HSRC in our country, around the world. We have this quite outstanding performance of 90% for this last financial year. And we're really pleased about that. The next slide just gives you an indication of on those individual targets, leadership, policy influence, partnerships, transformed research capabilities, and sustainability. How have we done? I think you'll be pleased to see, so those first three, we met all those indicators. The one on transformed research capabilities, which we are often under or struggling to get to 50%. We are pleased that we got to 50% on that. And we've got some really important plans in this new year about how do we kind of continue to ensure that we maintain those levels and are really looking at transformation within the organization. And then sustainability, which speaks to our finances and our funding. We also are quite pleased about that 50% performance on that. Next slide, please. So how do we understand the HSRC's achievement in the context of a COVID-19 year? I think Professor Sambai talked about some of the steps we had to take to make sure that we adapt to this new environment. And so we adapted and shifted our workforce to be a much more remote and virtual working performance. We had lots of physical engagements, training events, workshops, and conferences, of course, had to be cancelled. That also impacted on our planned performance, and we had to switch to much more virtual processes for all of these events And again, requiring quite nimble. I think most of us are surprised at how quickly we all have become much more technologically advanced with Zoom and Teams and all these other platforms. And we had to do the same thing. As our minister has indicated, and certainly took the leadership at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in mobilizing the system for coordinated response to COVID-19, the HSRC also had to similarly kind of gather itself and assimilate and share and do the research that would assist government in understanding the social aspects of the pandemic. And I think we're really pleased this last year. We are really pleased about how, as an organization, we managed to come together across different division centers and units to really respond to this call from government and respond to this national crisis that was facing us all. And so I'll talk about the many surveys that we've been able to do in this last year in response to that. But I think we are really, overall, really pleased about that. We also continued, given the switch to a virtual environment, we had to host many seminars on digital platforms. And I think given that adjustment, we're pleased that we held about 48 of those. We continue to inform awareness and public debate around the social and human dimensions of COVID-19 restrictions, and those 4 comments at the bottom of the slide give you an indication of what are some of those activities that we've been able to do. So just before I move to the next slide, I think in considering what we think is quite an outstanding achievement for the HSRC in this last year. I think we also want to acknowledge on the one side the achievements, the pluses, what's been significant, but also to realize and recognize that this must come at some cost. I think we have been talking to staff about this last year, and certainly they talk about this remote model, for example, allowing and affording more productivity, much more focus on work, but I think also talking about some of the mental health impacts of this working from home, where the boundaries between home and work are completely blurred, where your work days extend and kind of drag into the evening and early hours of the morning. So it's something we'll be looking at a lot more closely as we move forward in this next year, to look at how we can take some of the gains from this remote working and model, and how we can make sure that we also find a way of bringing us together again to allow for some of that social interaction and connection and brainstorming in person that is always a useful function and part of work. Next slide, please. So this really just, when I looked at the slide, I was quite astounded at how much we actually managed to do in this last year with regard to informing government planning through this range of surveys that we've done. I think we've really been pleased. I mean, scientists around the world, scientists in the country have all mounted a response. And I think what we have done particularly well in the HSRC is bringing this much needed social science and humanities perspective to the pandemic by running a range of surveys which have helped and informed government planning on how to deal with COVID-19, particularly from a social point of view. Much of this work, much of the surveys that we conducted took place using online platforms, and particularly the platform we've used is the BRR messaging platform, which is also data free. And so it allowed us to reach a much wider range and audience that is typical for our surveys. And you can see from the lockdown surveys in the beginning to the National COVID-19 Antibody Survey, to looking at death without dignity, COVID and customs in rural South Africa, to schooling and post-schooling, to looking at the South African National Survey on Health and Life, Experience and Family Relations, to looking at National Survey on Persons with Disability in COVID times. You can see the full range and breadth of surveys we've done that have really helped, I think, we hope, the country think about and mount appropriate responses from these social and human aspects in dealing with COVID-19. Next slide, please. Just talks about our outputs and some of our achievements here. Most of our outputs, knowledge outputs produced in 2020, 2021 were journal articles. Just under 70% of those were DHET accredited or peer reviewed. After our journal articles, which are often our biggest kind of return in terms of our outputs, were chapters. About a third of those were chapters published in scholarly peer-reviewed books. And so that slide just gives you a graphic and a sense of that I've just spoken to. Next slide, please. The next slide just really looks at the outputs that we've produced and who makes use of them. So as you know, as Prof. Sambai said in talking about our mandate, many of our outputs are curated and made available in an open access way and made available to anyone who uses. And so we try and track and see what are these usage patterns and in what ways and in which places is the knowledge we produce yet taken up by others. And you can see that 1,351 requests for HSRC research outputs were delivered during this past year. Those mostly come from South Africa, other fellow councils, universities, students and graduates, but also some from the United States of America and the United Kingdom, as very small proportions there. You can see the majority of the users of our data curated systems come from higher education institutions, as well as for people who request our work in their private capacities. Next slide, please. And this slide really just talks again to the research outputs that we've produced. We conduct a citation analysis by using different databases, and we can get a sense of the citation count of all published journal articles by the HSRC staff. So the kind of metric and the thinking is the more your article is cited, the more likely the information, the evidence that you're putting forward is being used by other people. So the higher the citation count, the better. So we use a tool called Scopus, and we had given ourselves a target of getting to 179 of our articles, 160 of our journal articles that had to be cited 10 times or more. That was our target for the last year. 160 of these articles had to be cited 10 times or more. And you can see in that top graphic that we actually have exceeded that target by about 20%. And that significantly more of our articles had the citation count of 10 or more. So again, gives an indication of the reach, of the use, of the fact that the knowledge we're producing in the HSRC has been used and been taken up by other researchers and academics in this space. Next slide, please. And I think that is over to you. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Professor Nanya Mbolabula.
Thank you very much.
Other way around, Nanya, Bola Mula. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Professor Van Rooyen. And thank you to the CEO. I'm very honored to be able to present to the Portfolio Committee today, and greetings to the Chair of the Portfolio Committee. So we have ongoing and long-term work that we are doing at the HSRC. The HSRC is very well known for its large-scale work, not necessarily only surveys, but also other forms of multidisciplinary research. And this slide just gives you an idea of the scope of the work that we do, the relevance of the work, and also that the number of kinds of funders that fund our work. So we have government funders who support our work, as well as international and national non-governmental funders. We are working in the areas of food and nutrition, which is a large survey that we are currently doing in the field in all 9 provinces. We do research and development survey for the Department of Science and Innovation. Also, a very well-known survey attitude survey, which tests the perceptions of people on numerous areas related to democracy and life in South Africa, where we have a number of funders. We have the famous, I believe, Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, or TIMS, where we look at how our researchers, how our students at primary schools are doing in these fields and in these areas. Another educational program is funded by MasterCard. We have the strengthening of capacities of science granting councils in gender and inclusivity, which is funded by the Government of Canada. AI ethics and human rights in Africa, funded by the Facebook Foundation. Schools Out, engaging with sexual and reproductive health and rights, funded by Amplify Change. We are also, as the HSRC, funding our own work because we believe this is in the national interest on the district development model pilot study. And we are also assessing the National Development Agency funded by the agency itself. That assessment is ongoing. Our COVID research will not be coming to an end. We will continue with this research as we are still in the midst of the pandemic, even though the numbers are looking quite good. Next slide, please. In terms of human resources management, this is just an idea of how our programs are looking within the HSRC. In program 1, we are looking at administration and shared services. And you can see the numbers there, as well as program 2, which is predominantly research focused. You will see that program 1 has grown substantially in the past year, and program 2 has reduced in numbers. The main reason for this is that we moved the Office of the Deputy CEO as well as the Impact Center into program 1 that used to be in program 2, which would explain the difference in numbers. However, we do have vacancies in the HSRC, which is affecting our ability to commit to everything that we would want to commit to. The percentage of vacancies generally under program 1, admin and social shared services, is 9%. And in program 2, the research area is 6%, 7% vacancies overall in the HSRC. At top management and senior management level, however, the vacancies are much higher. This, of course, places tremendous pressure on the researchers at the HSRC because of the fact that we have large projects that I've just mentioned that need to be completed. In terms of the number of resignations in this financial year, there were 21 resignations and 29 contracts came to an end, as well as retirements. Those are the numbers that I can share with you in terms of resignations and the ending of contracts. Next slide, please. Our employment equity, the HSRC employees by race, you can see there the clear graphs that indicate the racial composition of the HSRC, as well as the HSRC's employees by gender. You can see we have far more women than men working at the HSRC, and of course we don't want anyone underrepresented. To let you know that our employment equity plan has been improved by the Department of Employment and Labour, and we are working closely with the department to achieve these targets over a 3-year period. We are doing so by looking at the filling of vacancies to focus exclusively on equity and the underrepresented groups. And we are also looking at talent management within the HSRC to retain young, talented Black staff, as well as to attract the right kinds of staff that we require in order to meet our equity targets. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to the Chief Financial Officer now.
Good morning, Chair and honourable members, as well as colleagues. I will present the financial overview, including the audit report, as well as the annual financial statements. In terms of the audit report, yes, the HSRC got an unqualified audit opinion, but we do have findings on compliance with legislation. We had no material misstatements were identified on our annual financial statements, as well as no material findings were identified in terms of our annual performance information. The findings relate to our procurement and contract management. In the audit report, the Auditor General quoted some of the goods and services of a transaction value above 500,000 were procured without inviting competitive bids as required by Treasury regulations. Let's look at the irregular expenditure. As the note indicates, it's note 26 in our annual financial statements. We have got some irregular expenditure that occurred in the current year as well as that we've identified for the prior year. Both the current and prior period irregular expenditure identified are due to non-compliance to paragraph 8.5 of the SCM Instruction Note 3 of 2016-17. And it originates from the incorrect interpretation of a sole supplier versus a single source supplier. The sole supplier deviations are approved in terms of the entity's delegations of authority, but all single source suppliers must be pre-approved by National Treasury. We had 5 donor-funded subcontractor appointments to the amount of 3 million in the current year, and for the prior year, there was 12 donor-funder appointments to the amount of 12.8 million. We still need to do a further determination to identify the facts and the amounts relating to transactions from the 2016-17 financial year to the 2018-19 year. This will be concluded by management and reported accordingly. The said prescript that we have now transgressed has been in action since the 1st of May 2017. Our improvement plan included, we met with National Treasury, whereby the AGSA was also present in September 2021. The whole appointment was discussed. The previous appointments and our proposals is categorized under the single source suppliers, and therefore National Treasury requires pre-approval before we do the appointment or issuing of a purchase order or the signing of the contract. We have now changed our procedures and it is in place since now September 2021. We've also agreed on a turnaround time of 5 working days with National Treasury to respond on this nature of pre-approvals. We are in the process of updating our SCM policy. We are looking into a procurement framework which will allow us to single out institutions, universities, as well as other scientific councils and other public entities we would like to work with in a year. The AGSA also indicated to us that we must identify and determine the risk of losing our funding increases due to the delays resulting from the approval process. And we must either get a special dispensation from National Treasury to see that we can get a better lead time. We believe with this procurement framework, this will be achievable to minimize that time frame. After our SCM policy is updated with the new procedures, we will be doing training to all of our staff members in the organization. And this will form part of our consequence management to ensure that this type is not done again. As indicated, this was an interpretation issue that we had, and we are full of confidence we will get it right going forward. But I need to qualify that again, we need to look at the transactions for the prior years from 2016-17 to 18-19, and any identified will still need to be reported and accounted for in our financial statements. Let's highlight a couple of items in terms of our statement of financial position. We had an increase in cash in the year of 36.2%. This is about 151 million to 206.2 million. This is a significant increase, and it's largely to do with the income received in advance, which I'll highlight when we get to the liabilities. We also had a major increase in terms of our trade and other receivables, and this is mainly due to the invoices raised in the last 2 months of the 2021 financial year. Our work in progress did decrease from the prior year, but our impairment remained the same. Our prepayments decreased in the current year. Last year's was due to a prepayment made to one of our funders for the year, the partners. We had a decrease in our property, plant, and equipment in the current year, and that was due to the revaluation of our Pretoria building. Let's just look at this on a graph. Of our total assets, 51% is current assets, of which 71% is our cash and cash equivalents. In terms of our non-current assets, our major non-current assets is our property, plant, and equipment. If we look at the liabilities portion, our trade and other payables increased by 26%, which amounted to our accruals of 11.3 million at year end. As indicated, our income received in advance increased from the 90 million to 158 million, which was a 67.9 million jump or a 75% increase. Again, this is already amounts that's in our bank accounts. We just need to produce the work. If we look at it on a graph again, our total liabilities, our current liabilities is about 99%, which is mainly our income received in advance. Our non-current liabilities is our post-retirement medical aid liabilities that's due to staff members. If we look at our assets minus our liabilities, we do get our net assets, and that is our current liabilities is 38%. Our accumulated surpluses equivalates about 16%, and we also have got reserves. The reserves is our revaluation reserve of our buildings. Looking at the statement of financial performance, it's on note 13 on page 159 of our annual report. We had a decline in our revenue, our total revenue of about 5% or 21.7 million. In terms of our research, we only had a small decline. We had a decline in national and provincial funding of 24 million. We had an increase in our international funding of 10 million. We had a decline in the private sector, but we also had an increase in the universities of 15.8 million. Our parliamentary grant, in the year under review, we had a reduction of our parliamentary grant relating to the COVID cuts that was made. We had a reduction of 21.3 million. Our other operating revenue increased slightly with only 1%. The other operating revenue relates to our rental income as well as recoveries and interest received. When we look into the graph, you can see our parliamentary grant is quite steady over the years, but our research revenue has got a dip it took this year, but normally we do have an upwards curve. I will show that in a later slide. And our other income has been steadily growing slightly. In terms of our actual versus budget, again, we over exceeded a couple of years ago. We have slumped down, but we're on an upward spiral or trend at the moment. We had an absence of flagship projects in the 1920 financial year, most of which the work was already completed in the 17-18 financial year. We have secured now multi-year big projects, which will commence now in the 2021 financial year going forward. In terms of our expenses also declined by 33.8 million. Our administration costs is up by 2.4 million. Our research cost is almost the same. It only increased with 108,000. Our staffing costs declined with 33.7 million, mainly attributed to the vacancies that we had for the year. Our operating expenses also increased by 2.6 million. Our depreciation and amortization decreased for the current year. We ended the year with an accounting surplus of 22.4 million. When we look at our expenditure, 63% of our expenditure relates to personnel costs and 35% relates to our operating expenditure. For a service delivery organization, this percentage is quite good. It can be as high even as 66%. When we look into our national treasury spend between goods and services, compensation of employees and capital expenditure, it's much in line with what we reported in the annual report. For our budgets, we were below budget on all of our expenditure as indicated. We achieved and had savings on administrative expenses, as well as staff costs, other operating expenses and depreciation. Our research costs, we obviously planned and budgeted more expenses as well as more income, but underachieved by the amounts indicated. This graph explains the revenue trend. We have our research revenue. As I've indicated, it goes into an upward trend as soon as we've got our international big grants secured, and it goes in a downward trend as the project gets closed off. Our parliamentary grant, the grey line at the top, you will see it's been intertwined with our personnel costs to ensure that we stick to the cost containment as well as keeping salary costs down. Our salary cost was usually covered by the parliamentary grant. We had a couple of years that it was not, but we've now enforced that since 2020 to meet the instructions we got from National Treasury. As indicated as well, our revenue received in advance has always been a small amount, but for the last couple of years, the trend has gone upwards, meaning HSRC has got the money, we need to complete the projects. Thank you very much. I'm handing back over to Prof. Lightness and Bye.
Thank you so much. Just to wrap up, and thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Members. Clearly, the COVID-19 epidemic has shown us that we can do credible, authoritative work that can inform policy makers and society at large. Indeed, as we go forward, we'll bring some of the lessons that we've learned to the work that we do to ensure that we can make timely interventions that can support the country's political and socioeconomic agenda. As Professor Van Rooyen said, we have realized the capacity of our people to innovate and adapt under pressure. This will also be encouraged going forward as we look to bring more innovation and agility to the way in which the HSRC serves the social sciences and humanities and our country's objectives. While adequate budgets will always be desired, the Human Sciences Research Council will use the lessons and capacities developed in the past 2 years to deliver on its mandate more creatively. Management is committed to resolving the issue identified during the audit regarding compliance with laws and regulations. Next slide. I wish to thank the outgoing board, since Professor Tommy is present, and also to welcome the new board. And by the way, this is the first time we are meeting some of the board members. Other than that, I've interacted with Dr. Lubisi. So welcome to the new board members. We also appreciate the support that we received from executive, the Department of Science and Innovation. We also wish to acknowledge the role played by management and staff. And finally, and equally important, the role played by this portfolio committee. Thank you very much. Back to Professor Dr. Lubisi. I don't know if you want to wrap up. Or Professor Tom.
Thank you, Acting CEO. I think it's proper for the new chairperson of the board to make the closing remarks. I will still stay, as I said, and I may respond to some of the questions if there is need to do that. Thank you very much for the presentation that you have made, and thank you very much, chairperson of the board, for inviting me to this meeting. It just shows the manner in which we work in these entities. We do need to have continuity. We do need to have smooth transitions. And I would like to thank everybody who has supported the HSRC up to now. In fact, we have worked so well with the Portfolio Committee all the years that I've been here. So I would also like to appreciate the working relationship with the Portfolio Committee, the Minister and management of the DSI. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tom. Thank you to the management. Chairperson, we submit. This is our report to you for this meeting. And let me indicate that in about 2 minutes, it will be my chance to be load shedded. So I might disappear from the meeting for 10 minutes while I make alternative arrangements. Thank you very much. Over to you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that. Thank you very much, colleagues, for the presentation to both the previous leadership and the current leadership. I'd just like to confirm for purposes of record keeping, when was the new board appointed? Can I just, the exact date?
It's the first, Chairperson, is the 1st of November, 2021.
Okay, we're not certain between yourselves and the department, but I think the responsibility would lie more within the department on whether or not the new leadership was sent to Parliament. Of course, I think the required time frame was about 30 days. So you're still within that particular time frame, but perhaps the department can assist us with that clarity on whether or not there was some sort of communique sent to Parliament with regards to the new leadership. And then another thing I'd like to just clarify for record purposes as well is why exactly we then have the acting positions that we have within the executive. I think it's the CEO, the deputy CEO, and one other position as well. Can we just clarify what informs that, please?
Chair.
I can clarify that, Chair.
I see Ms. Wane's mic is open. Ms. Wane, I'll let you come in just after Professor Tom has come through. You may continue, Professor.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We have a substantive vacancy in the CEO position. And we have a substantive vacancy in the group executive shared services. And I'm talking about top management. And therefore, the current DCEO, the deputy, is acting as the CEO, which leaves a gap in his position. And that's why Professor Heidi van Rooyen is here as acting. She's got a substantive position in the organization. So she is now acting as a deputy CEO. And then in the shared services, group CEO, group executive, Professor Nanya, Dr. Nanya Bolamula is acting. So there are two substantive vacancies in which we have got acting people. We did try as hard as we could to recruit a CEO for the year. Almost from the beginning of the year, we started the process, but we were not successful. And this was shared with the minister, and we all agreed that we shall then leave the appointment of the CEO to the new board. Thank you, Chair. I hope that clarifies the position.
All right, thank you so much. I have switched off my camera. I'm not sure, Honorable Itzia, you and I are both in Acacia Park, so the network here can be a bit problematic, but I've switched off my network in case, sorry, I've switched off my camera in case that, that's putting strain on my network. Okay, Ms. Wane, I think you wanted to come through.
Thank you, Chairperson. Apologies for earlier. In terms of the board, informing the portfolio committee about the board, the document is en route to you, and it will definitely be within 30 days, but it's definitely en route. I think it's with the minister's office currently. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Swane. I see members' hands are up. I note the hands of Honorable King, Honorable Makesi, and Honorable Litsie, Honorable Mananiso as well. So we'll start with you, Honorable King.
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning to all the invited guests. Let me first also start off in congratulating the new board on their appointment, and I do believe going forward, as always, we will have a good working relationship. So the first one that I have question is based on the HR. I saw in the annual performance plan that basically there was a moratorium placed on baseline funded appointments. I just want to find out if that moratorium has been lifted for the current financial year that they are going in. Then also the Auditor General had basically concerns with the internal controls and how to address that, the culture of consequence management and best practice implemented by management on key risk areas. These were also highlighted by the internal audit as well as by the risk committee. So I just wanted to find out how at best are the action plans addressing these concerns. I did hear some plans were made, but how exactly is it going to pinpoint in order to ensure that it is addressed, specifically when they are referring to the supply chain management challenges which they had in the previous years. Also with the supply chain management, it basically was said that the main issues was in relation to the 2016 to 2019 issues which cropped up into the financial year under review. So, and also that there was misinterpretation. So when exactly will the investigation and the review plan be implemented? Has it started already to ensure that the 2016-2019 supply chain management challenges are adequately addressed? Also, I see that there are no infrastructure projects that was identified for the current financial year. So my thing would be, is HSRC considering collaborating with the NRF on its conceptualization of research infrastructure platforms for social science and the humanities domain, if they have that type of agreement? Sticking to infrastructure when it comes to the building itself, I see in the plans that most of the property which the HSRC are operating from, they are basically being leased. Like I saw the Cape Town lease, it's basically 771,211 Rand, excluding VAT per month. The Durban one is being leased at 123,795 per month, also excluding VAT. And the Sweetwater's lease is on 14,782. That is inclusive of VAT. So I just needed to find out, is the HSRC in the long run considering purchasing their own property to operate from, also then to cut on cost measure in that regard? If you look at the current ratio of the parliamentary funding and the external income, it basically is 52:48. I would just like to know what would then be, according to the HSRC, the preferred ratio that they would be looking at when it comes to the government funding ratio method. So Chairperson, yes, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable King. Honorable Makesi.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to switch on my video. I'm also having problems with connectivity this morning. I also would like, first of all, to say good morning to everyone and also to express my gratitude to the outgoing board and also welcome the new board. I hope the transition period is going to be smooth, and we look forward to working with them. I just have a couple of questions, Chair. I think I'm looking at the vacancy rate and the fact that this entity hasn't been able to fill all the vacancies. And what we were informed during the presentation was that there is an active initiative to really look at how to balance the equity within the entity. So I just want to maybe to get more clarity on how is this entity being able to make sure that they do attract talent out there, specifically those that are from the disadvantaged group, and as well as women who will like to be to be getting employment in this entity. And also, having said that, as much as the equity is important as well, I just want to find out, because as we all know, that we need to move ourselves into the direction of more research. And I think, for me, the issue of unemployment is something that is on our shoulders as politicians, and this kind of entities as well. They have, the ability, and they could actually have the scope to be able to absorb many of our, our graduates. So I would like to find out, what is the requirements that are put in place in terms of, being able to get the opportunities to work in this entity. I'm asking that because I know, you have students that are graduating yearly who are obtaining Bachelor of Science, who are unable to find work. They are unable to find work in this kind of entities because they are not specialized. They don't have, honors, masters, or PhD degrees. So that makes it very difficult for them to be able to find work in such entities. But I want to find out if is there a scope to kind of look at those graduates that finish with just Bachelor of Science. Let's say, for instance, I'm not saying that it just has to be a Bachelor of Science that is not specific on science, but we're talking about microbiology, we're talking about medical science, those kind of degrees that can actually be able to bring that kind of not really expertise, because obviously they are not people who have expertise in a particular area within that. They might be having sort of like, a generalized understanding of science when they complete their first degree. But is there an active, intention to look for this kind of graduates so that they can be part of these entities, and to be able to learn and to actually actively be able to assist in our research strategies. I also I saw the fact that we have there is I think amount of money that's, I think it's about 33%, if I'm not mistaken, that hasn't been really spent in this financial year. It could be that I'm making a mistake. I don't know. It was 100,000 or it was 33% that was not spent. I mean, I think that is well and good. The fact that this department has been able to meet its targets. I mean, we're talking about an entity that is able to get to its 90% of its target, over 90% of its target, which is something that is admirable compared to what we have seen in the past few weeks with our entities. But for me, I believe that there is a scope for the Health Research Council to be able to grow, and I believe that your budget has to be increased. But I don't. When I look at your financials, I don't see that kind of. I know you obviously have to look within the budget that will be given to say, okay, fine, these are our targets and all that. Is there a way that you can actually say this is in order for us to be able to break the unemployment? Unfortunately, for me, that's my biggest issue as a politician, to say, how do we get our young people into employment? And I know that for sure that this department has a potential to do that. And I would like to really see that, what is it that we are doing, or what is the intention? What is it that we are proposing to revenue as an entity to say, yes, you are funding us for this, but we have the potential to actually do this kind of research, and that will actually be able to get us this kind of young people who can actually join us if we actively look for them. And at the same time, this can actually grow our economy to that much. Is there that kind of focus that you are proposing to the current government, and also to Treasury, to say, this is where we want to be? Because if I'm a politician and I see your financial and I see that you are able to meet your targets, to me that tells me that you are can go even beyond that and be able to be the drivers of our economy, to be the drivers of trying to eradicate poverty and inequality. So I don't know if that, I know it's a bit of a broad question, but I would like to really have an understanding is there that kind of mindset within this entity to say that, we have the expertise and we have the potential to go and look for young people that qualify? Because I know for a fact that every university, year after year, produces students that qualify with BSc degrees, and unfortunately, not all of them are able to find work. Unless they go on and study, honors and masters and PhD degrees. That's only the time that they're actually really recognized to actually take part in this kind of entity. Thank you, Chair. That's about it from me.
Honorable Makesi, have you concluded?
Yes, I have. I'm sorry, was I audible?
Yes, I think you were. I just think I missed you for a second on my side. Thank you, Honorable Makesi. Honorable Itie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to honorable members. Good morning to the team led by Meku Guzwane from DSI, and the former chair of Council of HSRC, and the new chair and the new board and management of the entity. Good morning to yourself as well. I think the audit outcome of the entity, as the chair said earlier on, based on the standard of the entities in the department and the entity itself, does not look good. And that is based on the standard that you yourself would have set of having a very good audit outcome year in and year out. And this year, it does not look the same. Maybe they can take us through what is it that they think would have happened for them to regress a little bit to unqualified with an opinion, whereas I think the previous year they would have gotten a clean audit. So on issues to consider, I think there's a recent institutional review that would have been undertaken in the institution. What were the key findings and how are they being addressed? And what progress can be reported in relation to the suitable strategies to enable the organization to evolve from research generation only to research use and research impact assessment. How will this review recommendation for the entity to have a much more focused and consolidated program of work be realized? And based on the presidential youth employment, what progress can be reported there? And what progress can also be reported in relation to the DSI internship program transferred from the NRF to themselves? And then with regard to audit outcome and findings, what progress can be reported in relation to consequence management actions? What actions are being implemented to address the identified weaknesses? And will this ensure that the entity receives a clean audit for the 2021-2022 financial year? And finally, has the full amount of fruitless and wasteful expenditure been recovered from the responsible staff? And and what is it that really, what is it that they can report in terms of the consequence management against those employees over and above the amount that may be recovered from those staff members? Thank you very much, Chairperson. And yes, I am done, Chair.
Sorry, Honorable Litsi, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you so much. Honorable Mananiso.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start by as well welcoming the report from HSRC. And one must say that in terms of other issues that has to do with the regression of the audit outcome, I'm covered by yourself and Honorable Litsi. And want to say to the leadership of the board that it is important that they submit the action plan with regards to their response to the audit findings to the portfolio committee, so that we are able to measure them with whatever that they could have committed on. For instance, we have met with other entities of which one have learned that even their action plan regarding responding to the audit findings, it's not smart. That some of us, you would have, hope that things will change. So I just want to say to them, when they consider doing that audit action plan, they must be able to draft the smart type of audit plan, so that as the portfolio committee, we can do our oversight. The other issue that I wanted to as well acknowledge from the board and management is the issue that indeed some of us who have access to your online and digital platforms, we did see the work of the entity. However, I feel that most of the time when I speak in this particular platform on issues of the community, I feel that when we speak issues of research, issues of science and innovation, most of the time we see us leaving the disadvantaged society behind. And I just want to say that to the year plan, with regards to your lobbying and advocacy programs and awareness, I just want to say to them they would need to do much more with regards to indigenous platforms, so that they create a balance. Because with what they have reported in terms of them, having bigger achievements on utilizations of digital, it really reflects that indeed, if we're going to continue, using the digital platforms, we're going to be leaving other societies behind, and the communities that we feel that they need to be brought to par in terms of ensuring that they contribute to our developmental state. So I just want to just say that to them that they must do much more with regards to taking note that we still have people at this age and time that they don't have access to your data and other accessible infrastructure for them to actually get to know what is their work as HSRC. Again, Chairperson, I think we, as the Portfolio Committee, we have said this for the whole week and from last week, that, I mean, it's very worrisome that at times you will read about a report that indicates that there's issues of non-compliance on issues of legislations, supply chain management. So I just want them to as well submit a report that indicates specifically to say what could be the challenge. Is the challenge the system or the human body or that is there, for instance, who's working in the supply chain, that could have led to these particular findings of misstatements and other things. So I just want them to give us that particular indication if they can do so now. If not, they can actually submit to us as the Portfolio Committee. And I'm happy that when they were reporting to us, they indicated that they made a commitment to the AG that at least some of the things they would ensure that they work around 5 days. So I just want to say to them, I hope that they would stick to their commitment and respond to it. Lastly, Chairperson, with regards to the work that it's been done by the entity, I think we, as young as we are in this particular Portfolio Committee, it is very interesting that at times we would need to advocate and be biased on their programs, more especially those ones that are created for youth unemployment challenges. I just want to say to them, perhaps we just need to get a report rather than me asking them what is it that they are doing for youth or employment and youth development. But I just want them to give us perhaps a report that has those indications in terms of them ensuring that they bring along young people in terms of programs development that they are actually developing as an entity. However, one believes that they can do much more better next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mananiso, and to all members that have asked questions this morning. I think from my side, I just wanted to ask, when does the new board intend to conclude the process of appointing the new CEO? I think that would be, what timeframes have you given yourselves in terms of that? Because that would be critical. In relation to the importance or that, the fact that it's quintessential to have a stable leadership in any organization to ensure that, the performance of the organization is on par. So can we just have an understanding of the timeframes that the board has given itself to conclude that particular process, if you have? And then I think for me, really what becomes essential is for us to have an outline in terms of your audit action plan on how you will remedy some of the non-compliance that by and large constitutes the majority of the reason why I think there was a regression on the audit outcomes of the entity in the year 2020-2021. So for us, it's to reflect, like Honorable Lydia's question alluded to say what, when you introspect as an organization and you reflect and make your own analysis as an organization, what exactly would have contributed to the challenges that you had? But then more importantly is how do we then move forward coming out of that? So that would be important to me. But also I think there's one minor one, it could be minor, it could be grave, depending on how you look at it, in relation to fruitless and wasteful expenditure on missed flights and traffic fines. I mean, that's it's 27,000, yes, but it's something that can really be avoided. And so I don't know if there's conversations within the organization to speak to colleagues with regards to that. And yeah, definitely we must indicate that we are concerned in terms of the non-compliance, in terms of in relation to supply chain management within the organization. But those are the questions from members by and large. If there are any other following matters that do arise, we will allow members perhaps some time, or maybe members could write in the group. Honorable Sibia, we note that your network is bad, therefore you will no longer be raising your question. However, we hope that one of the members may have covered you. So I'll hand back to the leadership of the organization to then respond to the various comments and questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I would like to request Professor Simbai to lead in response to the questions, as well as our CFO and other members of management who are here. If they can kick off, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. And also thanks to Honorable Chair and Honorable members for the questions that were posed. I will give an opportunity to my colleagues to answer questions relating to their, but just to acknowledge that we are taking the issue of the audit outcome very seriously. And as the CFO indicated, yes, there is an action plan. It's being implemented already. However, in terms of the fourth of this current year, because the Auditor General is still looking back 2 years before the last but one financial year, we don't know what the outcome will be. With the permission of the chair, I would like to share communication which perhaps explain the background of this. Could I do that? Sorry, that's the wrong one. Sorry, that's the wrong. That was the wrong. What I'm looking for is that one. Just to say, this has been an ongoing issue regarding the issue of supply chain, and in particular regarding to funding that comes from donors. Perhaps it might be helpful to go back and explain about the framework autonomy, which requires us to depend both on the parliamentary grant, which is approved by Parliament, as well as raise external funding. To a large extent, we are very successful in doing that, although the external funding does fluctuate in periods of cycles of about 4 years. This is because we do undertake our biggest survey, which is on HIV, every 4 years. So, for example, we currently have funding from PEPFAR through CDC amounting to over $20 million to undertake the next survey, which is about to go into the field. Chair, if you allow me, the letter which was written in 2017 by the then Chief Director of Supply Chain Management, Governance, Monitoring and Compliance to then CEO was, if you look at the last paragraph, if competitive bidding process was not followed, it says the deviation should be reported unless the donor directed the institution to use a different procurement approach. So what happens often is that, given the nature of the work we do, it does involve collaborating with people who are experts on the subject matter, both within and from universities and other science councils. Essentially, this is competition for funds. It's a tender, a bidding process, and funding is given to a winning proposal. So it so happens that often you do know who are the best people to work with, and then you prepare those proposals with them, because that improves the chances of you getting the tender. And essentially, where we went wrong was once we did that and we were successful, a contract from the funder. In the past, we had the understanding that once the partners are listed within the contract, because it would specify, give what percentage to this partner, what percentage to that partner, that is indicating that the funder actually is approving that you work with those particular people. And the only thing we didn't do, which is what we have now come to an understanding with the National Treasury, is that we will now submit, once we are successful, only when we get an indication from the funder that we are likely to win that tender or funding, they will look at it for 5 days and give us the go-ahead. So there has been an agreement to that effect. Normally, the procedure should have been that before we prepare the proposal, we actually engage in finding out who will go with us and seek approval of that before we actually submit a proposal. Unfortunately, timeframes, particularly when international funders are involved, are very short. And hence, that's why we have been able to come to this compromise with National Treasury and the Auditor General. So in terms of going forward, as the CFO indicated, we are going to follow the agreement that we have reached with National Treasury in terms of how the approval process will be done. I think the CFO can add to that when it's your turn. Just on one thing about how much funding, Honorable King asked about how much funding is adequate. The last but one institutional review proposed an 80 parliamentary grant to 20 external funding formula. We think that will be ideal because then staff will focus more on doing research other than now where senior researchers tend to focus more on fundraising. And in fact, to be able to do most of the work that we do apply for this external funding. Given that we are a statutory entity, that would be preferable if we had the 80-20. But in fact, compared to other science councils, we are more generously funded with that 55 to 45% we are talking about, because the other science councils falling under DSI actually receive much less and raise a lot more funding externally. We worry kind of that keeping things the way they are, our research agenda is partly influenced or it's influenced to a large extent by the availability of funding to undertake work in particular things. So the best scenario would be if it were possible to get up to 80% of the funding required coming through the parliamentary grant so that we could just limit our external funding to only 20%. In terms of our relationship with the National Research Foundation, I'm pleased to say during the development of the strategic plans of the two institutions, we have been working with each other very closely. And there is actually a lot of synergy between our plans. And in part, it has to do with the fact that we and other statutory councils are following the DSI's decadal plan. That has identified the areas in which we need to work, and therefore together there is much agreement about what we do. I think we could engage with them much more so that together with other players in humanities and social sciences, we could actually make a concerted effort on particular issues of national importance. I think I will stop there, maybe ask the CFO, followed by the DCO, acting DCO, and then the acting GE for shared services to answer questions which relate to them, to their portfolios. Thank you so much. Over to you, Jacobin.
Thank you, Prof. Sambai. So I'm going to touch on a couple of the questions asked. The first one that was asked is relating to the notice in the internal audit findings, the risk, as well as the best practices. So obviously we need to go back to basics to see that our internal audit is up to scratch, as well as everything is done. We are doing a complete revision of all of our policies relating to finance, supply chain, as well as risk management. This is necessary to ensure that everything is up to date with legislation. The organization has been working towards that, finishing a couple of policies, and we will be serving a lot of policies to the new board as soon as we can serve them and constitute that. That is the best way to go to ensure that our internal control is addressed from the internal auditor side as well as the external auditor side. Management is in process to review the transactions as indicated for the 2016-17 to 2018-2019 financial year. The auditors wanted actually everything now before we closed off the audit, but due to time constraints, they offered management the period to look into the transactions and report it with the next audit. So management is busy interpreting, looking at the purchase orders issued, as well as all of the documentation to see if it has met a sole supplier or a preferred supplier, and it will go on the list of irregular expenditure. Once our investigation is concluded, we will then serve the report to our board, and then it will be recommended to National Treasury to look at as well. The time frame scheduled for that currently is the fourth quarter of the current financial year. As indicated, yes, the organization did have an accounting surplus at year end, but there's a specific formula that National Treasury requires us to request for retained funds. The request was made and it was granted by National Treasury. We submitted a list of items that we would like to use, and it was approved. We are now in the process of implementing and spending the surpluses on research projects as well as internal infrastructure in the forms of IT equipment that we have bought for the organization. What was mentioned, yes, we have regressed to from a clean audit to an unqualified audit with matters, and the compliance to laws and regulations is the major one. Due to the monetary value, it was with matters. If the values were smaller, I believe the Auditor General would have not raised it to the audit report. But because these are quite large numbers, only 5 and 12 transactions each, that was raised. We need to, like I've indicated, correct our policies, follow our procedures, do internal training to staff members, and get that framework out that we can use that. I believe also regular contact meetings with National Treasury will improve the turnaround time of 5 days that they have implemented. We've already scheduled or trying to schedule another meeting in this quarter and would like to obtain to keep continuing have quarterly meetings with National Treasury so we don't have issues like this again. In our organizations, we keep track of all our internal as well as external audit findings in a register, which is available if the committee would like to have it. It's served at our audit and risk committee meeting as well as our board meeting, stating what's the plan of action, the person responsible, as well as the time frame for all of these actions. The report can be sent to the committee. In terms of consequence management is also done for irregular expenditure as well as fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Once we've concluded our investigation, then we will identify if there is a process that we can follow to obviously get the money back in terms of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, or seeing how we can improve the process. This was an interpretation issue regarding this specific practice note. The best would be to progressively discipline staff members in terms of giving that training, acknowledging we have now communicated to everybody, and as I've indicated, since September, we are now on the new process. For fruitless and wasteful expenditure, immediately staff members are made aware that they are responsible and it's deducted from their salaries. I know the amount looks high in comparison to the year, but it obviously moves up and down how we are deducting from staff members. Unfortunately, there is a small portion of staff who unfortunately leave the organization. Either they were appointed on a contract basis before we could get the parking ticket or the missed flight. And those items we're unfortunately going to have to make a decision to write off if the legal expenses is exceeding to get the amount back to the organization. Our legal department is aware of this, and we are chasing every single fruitless and wasteful expenditure to get the amount down to as much or as little as possible. A report regarding the SCM challenges can also be given to the committee, but as indicated now, it's mainly concerning the interpretation of this practice note that has led to this, as well as a change in audit team. The prior auditors accepted our response. Currently, it was not accepted, but we are committed to doing the right thing, building our policies, making sure our building blocks is correct and going forward. We will supply all the reports required to the committee. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah.
Yes, thanks very much. So thank you very much, committee members, for those questions. I'll respond to a couple of them, particularly those that were talking about research related issues. I think the issue that came through quite strongly in the conversation today is one that resonates with us quite closely, and it's the issue of youth unemployment and what we as the HSRC are doing about that. I think it resonates quite strongly with us. We are recently and will launch in the new year, the new financial year, a new unit that will allow us to address and put in one place our capacity development and learning initiatives, and our two initiatives that we've been focusing on that look at youth internships, youth placement, and address this issue of unemployment. And those two programs, the external facing programs, is the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative interns who came on for a short period of time, 6 months, and then the larger DSI HSRC internship program, which has transitioned over to the HSRC. And I'll say a little bit, I'll say a little about each of those and where we are. The PYE program was a short-term program for about 6 months that equipped and built the skills and capacities of about 500 young people spread across the HSRC and in a range of locations and spaces in the across the country rural, informal settlements, urban settlements. So really well-placed, these young people in all of these spaces. Young people were trained and equipped with a range of skills, from soft skills, but those important skills in communication, on being a professional and being in a workplace environment, to providing a range of services in those communities. That 6-month placement and program has now come to an end. The majority of those interns will transition out of their placements by the end of November. We've been in conversation with DSI about how we might use the remaining 10 million surplus to keep on a smaller cohort of those interns. One of the things we were not able to complete through the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative was community surveys. We would use young people to do surveys in their communities around various diseases and non-communicable diseases, including substance use and mental health. But we would deploy these young people at a community level to get a sense of this. We were not able to do that because of COVID and all of the restrictions. Instead, we did an online version of that. So we've agreed with DSI. I'm in the process of negotiating a no-cost extension for 6 months from 1 January to July next year. It will allow us to bring back a cohort of that original 500, and we'll have to think through in terms of principles of fairness, how we select a portion of those to be included now in this extended internship. I think our observations from this 6-month internship through the Presidential Youth Initiative is that 6 months is not a long time to onboard young people into work environments, to train and equip them and give them enough time to then implement those skills. And so having a slightly longer period with a smaller group of these young trainees will certainly allow us to much more fully flesh them out and embed them in the world of work, and then hopefully equip them and create opportunities for them moving forward. The DSI HSRC internship program has transitioned, as I think we reported at our last meeting. We have about 420 odd interns that are placed on a 2-year program, and these are from honors to masters, from a range of disciplines in the social science and humanities and the sciences. We have over 170 placement organizations, both in institutions, higher learning institutions, as well as community-based organizations. And I think it speaks to the concerns that many of you have raised about the extent of unemployment among young people. So we could only place 420 odd of these young people, but we had applications in the range of 8,000 that we received for this. I think just qualitatively or anecdotally, as we look at these young people and we reflect on them, and we've had a few of them that have transitioned from that 6-month Presidential Youth Initiative employment process into the longer 2-year process. And I think that's the kind of initiative we wanted to kind of build as we move into the new years. How can we create these opportunities for work, for employment, to allow young people to transition from a shorter internship process into a longer one, so they can stay in the HSRC and they can stay in other institutions for 2 years, and it can be an opportunity for them to kind of continue even further. So that HSRC DSI internship program, we've recruited now the 420 odd. Most, in fact, all of them have been placed, and those internships now will start in earnest. And I think in the new year, with this idea of having a unit in the office of the DCEO that will allow us to really think about conceptually and in a concerted way, how do we address this issue of youth unemployment? We also have a division that focuses very much on this issue. And so together we'll be thinking about how do we create these opportunities through these internship and placement programs for addressing this issue of youth unemployment. And so any support, any additional funding, anything else that would allow us to grow as the HSRC, to grow and expand this, would be really, really welcome. It's an area of work that is really close to our hearts. And then I want to just end off by saying a couple of things about the comments about moving to research use and impact as in our new strategic plan. Yes, that's also a piece of work that's really important and key to us in the HSRC. We started the Impact Center about 19 months ago in the HSRC to drive this question of impact. We've done a lot of work in the past year in terms of internally training in the organization around impact. We have a range of impact resources that are made available, lots of training internally and on impact tools and what it means and how do we take it forward. I think in this next year, we really want to be looking at how do we try and embed this, how do we take this further, and particularly how we started this last year as well. But how do we now start to look at linking up much more closely with others who are all working in the system or working around the question of impact. We held a very successful conference led by NRF, ourselves at the HSRC as we're partners, looking at this issue of the impact of science. And we want to look at how we consolidate that, strengthen that, and take that forward in this new year. We particularly want to be looking at what new methods we can be putting forward as the HSRC that allow us to address this issue of impact in a broader way, and allow us particularly to address the issue of impact from a social science and humanities perspective. Many of you will know that when we think of impact, we think of these measures of before and after, and sometimes we can't always track what change has been made, what has been transformed, how has impact occurred. And we think using much more qualitative social science methods around telling stories of change or stories of impact might be a useful way of doing that. And we want to look at that and other methodologies in this new financial year. So we're really excited about strengthening, deepening, taking that impact conversation further in the organization. A couple of really exciting initiatives around case studies at our very successful model of community-based research that happens in our site in KwaZulu-Natal, but looking how we can extend that now to other parts of the HSRC using elements and components of that. And I want to end there by just talking about some of the questions around dissemination and the comment about that with our particular methods, the online method, we sometimes might be missing greater audiences, particularly rural and informal settlement audiences. I think, again, it's something that we are very aware of in the HSRC. Our LEAPS indicators that I talked to earlier on really take this issue of engagement with community, engagement with policymakers, with civil society, with the community-based organizations really, really seriously. So it's actually something that we track and that division centers units are compelled to do, is to look at, and it's part of the impact question. Once you have got evidence and once you have got information from a particular study, and certainly in the beginning as you're shaping those questions and doing the work, how can you make sure that this evidence is translated, is disseminated, is put back into the hands of communities, is put back into the hands of stakeholders? So division centers units are all required to track this issue and report on this issue and meaningfully, not just report on it, but meaningfully engage communities and stakeholders in disseminating the research. And so, yes, it means going beyond and outside of our offices to where communities are in delivering these messages. So it's an important part of what we do. And I think just briefly on the actual survey tools that we use, as I mentioned, a lot of the online survey messages are actually free. So we use a data-free platform that allows us to extend beyond the usual suspects that can afford have smartphones and using these platforms. We have a data-free platform that allows us to move into rural and informal settlements. And you look at all of those surveys that I mentioned, we have a really great representation from many of those sectors. But alongside that is a real commitment in the HSRC to move beyond and outside of these spaces that we are comfortable and familiar with, to making sure that our messages are being distilled, are being translated, are made accessible, and therefore reaching those who need it in the places where they are and where they live.
Okay, Namia.
Thank you very much, Chair and CEO. I'll just address 3 issues because I understand that we are running out of time related to shared services, although I wear 2 hats because I'm also heading up a research division at the HSRC. In terms of the moratorium, the staff moratorium is still in place at the HSRC. What we do internally is very much dependent on what the National Treasury regulations state about salary caps. But we do need to reconsider the situation in terms of the moratorium off appointments of baseline funding. And I'm sure that the new board will address this and look at it very closely to ensure that we have the capacity to do what we need to do. In terms of the buildings that we lease, The Pretoria building is actually owned by the HSRC, and we share it with the Department of Social Development, who rent half of the building from us. So this money covers the leases of the other offices of the HSRC. We also need to take into account that we were moving towards a hybrid approach of working from home. And therefore, we would need less office space and more hot offices and conferencing. So we are reconsidering how we actually deal with the office situation, and we are looking at possibilities of renewing leases or moving to smaller facilities, especially in Cape Town. And then lastly, with regards to compliance, legislative compliance in particular, we do need to strengthen our legal services division and have a more senior appointment made of someone who could be a compliance manager within the HSRC, so that we have a legal mind who is also business savvy and would be able to ensure that the organization at all times complies with legislation and regulations, which is not always simple because regulations and legislation change from time to time. And we also have to interpret them properly in order to do our work sufficiently. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Nanya, just on the employment equity issue. That's finally.
Yes, apologies. So in terms of the employment equity issue, we are very well aware of the fact that we require work to be done in this area. The HSRC takes transformation in all aspects very seriously. And there has been progress made in the last few months, actually, as we are filling in vacancies that we do have, that we are able to fill. In all our advertisements, we make it clear that preference will be given to designated groups. And in our recruitment process and in our appointment process, we have, in fact, improved the equity profile of the HSRC substantially through our new appointments. And we do have the data to share with you if you wish to see that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Sorry, Chairperson, before we hand back to you, I just wanted to indicate that since the board was appointed just over 2 weeks ago, it hasn't yet met, it hasn't yet been inducted, it hasn't yet formed board committees. It is only after that that we will then be able to formulate clear board plans. Once we are able to meet, we are able to be inducted, and then we will take it from there. That would include issues you raised regarding the timeframes for the employment of a new CEO. So at this moment, we do not have a firm answer to that question. It will only arise once the board has met and has been inducted and has formulated its plans. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for indulging us.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much to also, I guess, the outgoing leadership as well for availing themselves and coming back to assist in this particular briefing. I want to believe that by and large, most questions of members have been answered. If there are some that may have been left out, we kindly urge for members to send those questions to ourselves, to the colleagues in the Secretariat of the committee, so that we can follow up with colleagues from the HSRC. But I want to believe that by and large, most of our questions have been answered. And we do urge that, Ms. Swane, when you have, we're hoping that you will then send that communique officially to ourselves. We'll be awaiting that communique. But also, that we receive the outcomes of the conclusion of the process of the appointment of the CEO. Once that is also done. I then want to, of course, I think we by and large, appreciate the responses that colleagues gave us with regards to why we saw the regression that we saw. Our focus really will be over the next year to monitor and evaluate the progress of the HSRC to perhaps get back to the clean audit. And as Honorable, I think it was it Mananiso or was it Litsia who said, we want a clean audit, not just a clean audit. So I don't know, if the clean audit is possible, but basically want to see the entity doing as great as we believe it can do. And we are available as well as the committee to be of, to be a motive force in whatever would assist yourselves in ensuring that you get back to the clean audit. So from our side, I think, thank you very much, colleagues. We would also appreciate just to be kept updated with regards to your audit action plan on how you will remedy some of these matters. But by and large, we really want to thank you. And we want to wish you luck and, just really encourage you and implore on you to continue doing the great work that you do. Colleagues, we are then going to release yourselves. If you would like to stay in the meeting, you're more than welcome to. But we are supposed to, as the committee, continue with our with the adoption of various reports and minutes. I'd like to just check if members have been previewed to the reports and the minutes to go through them. I want to believe that they were sent to members. So I'll need your assistance, Shanaz or Anele, to just be able to. All right, so we'll use the order as sent in our emails. The first one would be the report of the committee for the consideration of the 2020-2021 fourth quarter and 2021-2022 first quarter performance reports of the Department of Higher Education and Training. That would be at the top of that page. The end of the document, which is a 16-page document, basically speaks to Program 6 of the Department of Higher Education program, and basically saying that we need to expand access to more out-of-school youth and adults, and then the report is to be considered. Can I note hands that seek to adopt this report, or that perhaps let's start with amendments to the report? Honorable Mananiso. Honorable Mananiso, I see your hand is up. I'm not sure if your device is struggling to open.
Chairperson?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'm having a challenge in terms of connectivities. One would want to consider the report as a true reflection of the meeting. I move for the adoption.
Thank you, Honorable Mananiso. Can I note a hand that seeks to second the adoption? Honorable Sibia.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm seconding the adoption of the minutes by Honorable Mananiso.
Thank you, Honorable Sibia. I just want to actually, check. I want to believe that we are correcting. 1, 2, 3. Shanaz, can you assist me just making sure that we are correcting? I think I didn't check that before I started this process.
We are correcting, Chair.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I also feel like looking at the numbers we were, but I wanted to make sure, not just to assume. All right, the minutes of that particular report that report has been adopted. We'll now move on to the committee's report on the 2020-2021 fourth quarter and 2021-2022 first quarter financial and non-financial performance report of the Department of Science and Innovation as dated September 2021. That report is 15 pages long. It concludes with us recommending that we be provided in writing with additional detail on the IKS Act regulations, the consultation process for the regulations, and the status of the issues at the 5 IK documentation centers. Can I note hands that seek to adopt this report, or perhaps that seek to make amendments to the report and then adopt it? Honorable Mananiso. Honorable Litsier.
Thank you, Chairperson. I here move for the adoption of the report as a true reflection of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Litsier.
I was a little bit late, Honorable Manani, so moved on my behalf. I second.
Thank you very much. That report on the DSI has been adopted. Moving on to the next document. These are now the draft minutes from the 1st of September, where we received a briefing from the DSI and DHET in terms of programs in support of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. That's a 6-page document. Yeah. Can I note hands that seek to adopt the document? The minutes. Honorable Litsier, followed by Honorable Mananiso.
We're moving for the adoption, Chair.
Thank you. Then the next one would then be on the 10th of November, where the AG's office was present together with DHET, NSFAS, CHE, and QC2O. It's a 10-page document. And those would then be the minutes. Can we see hands that seek to adopt these minutes as a true reflection of our meeting?
Chair.
Yes, Honorable Mananiso.
Yes, thank you. For procedural purposes, I just want to second the minutes as adopted, firstly by Honorable Litsier, the ones of the 1st of September.
Oh, apologies. Thank you so much for that. Yes.
All right. And then I here move for the adoption of the minutes of the 10th of November as a true reflection of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Can I see a hand that seeks to second the adoption? Honorable Sibia.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm seconding the adoption of the minutes by Honorable Mananiso.
Siyabonga, Mam Sibi. The minutes from the... Someone's mic is open. Not sure whose mic that is. Okay. The minutes from the 10th of November have thus been adopted. Thank you. And now we're on the last document, which are the minutes from the 12th of November, where we received briefings from the AG's office, the DSI, the NRF, the CSIR, as well as SANSA. Can I note hands that seek to adopt? Honorable Mananiso.
No, it's an old hand. I was not present.
Okay. Honorable Litsi, I don't know if that's a legacy hand or that's a new hand.
It's a new hand, Chair. I move, having noted that the resolution of that meeting has already been, one of the resolution has already been effected by inviting HSRC to brief the committee, Chair, on the annual report based on the findings by the AGSA. We did that today. I move for the adoption, noting that we are moving very swiftly in implementing resolutions, Chair.
So indeed, the minutes are a true reflection of that meeting. Thank you, Honorable Litsiye. Honorable Sibiya.
Thanks, Chairperson. I'm supporting the adoption of the minutes. Thanks, Chair.
Siyabonga kakhulu, Mam Sibi. Honorable members, that then concludes the business of the day in terms of the proceedings of the Portfolio Committee. Thank you so much to all of you for availing yourselves. Those minutes have been adopted together with the 2 reports. We will see each other next week, Wednesday, and we do hope that you remain safe throughout the weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Recording stopped. Thank
you to everybody else. Enjoy your weekend. Don't do things that we won't be doing. Thank you.
Same to you.
You too, Honorable Litsiye. Don't do things we won't be doing.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Bye, Renee. I've not seen you in a long while, Renee.
She's gone.
She's gone. Yeah, she's like a ghost. She moves quickly. Okay, enjoy your weekend, Shanaz.
I will. I'm waiting for Saturday, as you are.
Yes, of course, of course. we must avenge the thing of last.
Yes.
All right, sure.
Okay. See you. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.